Hello there, one and all, and welcome to episode 3 of our Perfume Masterclass series here on YouTube with me, Persolaise, coming to you live at the moment, and also joining me in the studio once again, because we're still talking about ingredients, is Remi Pulverail of Les Indemodables and the Atelier Francais des Matieres, coming to us from Annecy or near Annecy. Thank you very much for joining us. And as I was just saying to you before we started the broadcast, Remi, I've got today and tomorrow to wish you a happy new year. So happy new year to you. How's January been for you so far?
Yeah, happy new year, Darius, and to everybody. And yes, we are starting 2023 with a lot of projects and enthusiasm.
Good.
So that's great. And I am happy to be here again with you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for taking the time for what is becoming a very, very kind of popular part of this YouTube channel, with lots and lots of people contacting me, asking me when the next episode is going to be. So very, very briefly, what happens with these masterclass videos is that we delve into certain aspects of the industry in greater depth than we would in the Love at First Scent videos. So we don't specifically talk about perfumes here, but for the moment we've decided to focus on ingredients. You should be able to find episodes 1 and 2 of the masterclass very, very easily. As I say, this is episode 3. We're going to be focusing today on Vetiver and Myrrh, and picking Remi's brains about all of the sort of perhaps lesser known aspects of those two materials. I should also just mention this Grand Cru ingredients box that Remi put together a little while ago. It's available on the Les Indemodables website. And also, if you're in the UK, you may want to get it from the Saint-Celier website. I'll put links to those up in the video description. Vetiver and Myrrh are key ingredients in the Les Indemodables perfume Oriental Velours, one of my favorites from the brand, as you'll know, which is down here in the box. I'm sure a lot of you will also have questions. I think feel free to send the questions at any point during the broadcast, because if there are any that come up that are particularly relevant to what we're talking about, I'll just put them to Remi straight away. But I think that's enough of a preamble. Let's make a start, because time is always against us with these, and we may have a chance to smell some of these beauties that you've sent me as well. Let's start with Vetiver. One of the most well-known perfume ingredients. So let me start with, I suppose, a less controversial question to begin with. Is it true, Remi, that almost every single perfume out there contains some vetiver, or not really?
No, because
Okay.
it remains an expensive ingredient in the range of 150, let's say, to 300 euros per kilo. So it's not a cheap one, and it's an ingredient which is really more used in the fine fragrance creations, together with vetiveryl acetate, which is derived from the essential oil, and which is a kind of stabilizer, because it really comes in the base notes. So no, you don't find it, for instance, like patchouli, in some more, let's say, functional products like detergent or shower gels or whatever.
Right.
So really, yeah, vetiver.
Okay, but if we are just talking about fine fragrance, is it in a lot of fine fragrances?
Not that
Or even then, not so
much
much.
high dosage, I would say. Now it's becoming also a bit popular for some feminine fragrances, but I would say that it's not a very, very big ingredient. You see, in terms of volumes, you are in the range of 100 tons. If you compare to patchouli, it's probably 10 or 15 times less. So you see, no, it's not it's a medium-sized ingredient, and no.
Okay, that's fine. Now, before we started the broadcast, you kindly sent me some of your own thoughts about these ingredients, some of, outlining some of the work that you've done with it. And I think the main thing that I was struck by when I was reading what you sent me about vetiver, it's probably the same thing that a lot of people would be struck by, was actually about the country where most of our vetiver comes from, particularly Haiti. And you mentioned, and it is also not just you saying it, it's lots of people saying it, that Haiti in many ways is quite a troubled country. It's quite a corrupt country. I was sort of reading somewhere that on a kind of global index of countries which have been sort of put on a sort of range from, you know, most corrupt to least corrupt. Haiti is very, very much towards the end of being, you know, towards the most corrupt. Lots and lots of things there are run by gangs. A lot of the country is run by gangs. Apparently, there isn't a sort of properly, fully functioning government. So how do you work with a country that's in that sort of a situation?
Alors, yeah, first to come back a bit in the history of Vetiver, it's quite a recent one, I would say, dating back to the 19th century, and the first big producer country of Vetiver was the Bourbon, the Réunion Island, you know, close to Madagascar, the French.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Réunion a bit later, but yeah, go on.
Yes. And so let's say at the beginning of the century or in the late 19th century, it was the number one producer with a few tens of tons and the best, really very good quality. And then it was introduced in Haiti, early 20th century by a French guy. And then there was some local people in Haiti who start making some plantation and also investing in distillation units. And then during World War II, of course, the supply of vetiver was very difficult, and the main user was the United States. So Haiti was a very convenient country of supply for the United States, as you can imagine. And then in the 50s and 60s, really Réunion Island had very high production cost, and they stopped more or less the production, let's say, in large volumes. And Haiti really became the number one producer in the world, together with Indonesia today and a little bit India. But I would say what is fascinating in the story and in the history of vetiver is that there is a couple of guys who really built the vetiver industry or small industry in Haiti. And so I've been there very often over the last 15 years, and I've seen the evolution. And really, it's amazing first entrepreneurship story that Haiti became the first producer in the world of vetiver. You can imagine that vetiver, which is, if you multiply, let's say they produce maybe 70 tons in Haiti, multiplied by $200, you see it's something like 15 million or $20 million turnover in total. So it's very, very small. But it's today probably the second or the third exported product from Haiti, and the only one which is processed. The first one, probably coffee or mango. You see, these are the two main commodities which are exported from Haiti. But it's fruit as such, so there is no upgrading and very little added value. And the vetiver oil has some added value. So you see, it's a number one product of exportation of Haiti. You can imagine with such a such a small turnover. And to come back on the situation of Haiti, in Haiti you have earthquake, as there was a big earthquake in 2010.
Yes,
very,
that's right.
very poor country if you compare to the Dominican Republic, where you have a lot of tourism, almost no activity, no business, no businesses in Haiti. You have also a lot of
tornadoes,
and tornadoes, which are also impacting a lot the country with some floods, and so you have these climatic issues. And the first disease in Haiti is the drug, because this is the platform for the drug dealers between Colombia and Miami. And that's why the United States is so powerful in Haiti, because they try to control everything, including the government, and they are dropping a lot of money, especially after the earthquake. $1 billion have been sent to Haiti to support the country, but also to try to control the political situation. Today it's the big mess, unfortunately, as even worse than in the past. As you've seen probably in the newspapers, you have no more government, and the gangs have taken the power more or less in this poor island. And Yes, it's the drug is a big problem because you need to be very careful with whom you are working, because vetiver is used as a laundry machine, as you can imagine, because
For money laundering, you mean?
yes, so that's a bit the issue. And
So Remi, I need to, so for example, just on a practical level, if you're trying to get some vetiver out of Haiti, do you have to deal with these gangs or not?
No, because fortunately there are 2 or 3, let's say, quite big producer who are exporting, and but it's always very difficult but you need to investigate a bit to know where their money is coming from, because in the past, just to give you an example, Pablo Escobar has been a producer of vetiver oil in Haiti.
Right.
And you know why? Because he was using the vetiver drums to hide the drug on the bottom of the drums, going to New York or to the United States.
Okay.
So yes, that's the main problem really today. Alors, the crop.
So how do you, if you're dealing with Haiti, if you're dealing with the island, how do you make sure that you're not, indirectly supporting the drugs trade or supporting illegal activities or supporting dangerous activities?
But it's you need first to make sure that the people who are doing this activity are really focused on that activity and are not part of a bigger company, you see, with other bigger activity, because in Haiti the money is coming from the NGOs and from the United States, mainly. So these are the 2 big sources of money. So yes, this is really a close follow-up of the supplier's activity and making sure of the investment they are making in the factory, and yes, making sure that they don't belong to a bigger group where you have some other activities which are not very transparent. So yeah, it's really a daily issue. But now, with the information that you can get from the banks and from some authorities, there are some ways to really check all that. But this is really
that's if you trust the banks as well.
Yeah. The international banks, I mean, because these banks basically are supporting the financing from the governments and from all the NGO. You have hundreds of NGOs in Haiti. It's totally crazy. Some of them are undercover for the CIA, or you see this kind of organization who are really monitoring always the same, the drug storage on the island before exportation or before importation. So yes, you always have this, you see, huge, because you can imagine that the drug is really a massive and huge amount of money. So basically, the 2 sources of money in Haiti is NGO, governments, and United States first, and the drug.
This is really fascinating, and I'm going to take a comment now from Pradeep, who's basically saying exactly what I'm thinking. He's saying, wow, you could make a movie about every single ingredient's backstory that we've had so far. But I think vetiver particularly lends itself to a film. Has there ever been a situation, Remi, without naming any names, where you have had to stop working with a supplier because you thought, oh, hang on, I'm getting worried now,
Yes,
and I don't know.
of course, of course. One day, of course, I will not tell names because
no, please don't. Actually, don't.
But yes, one time I was invited in an evening dinner or a kind of night party in a place, and I really felt like being in the film of Martin Scorsese. You see, about gangsters, because you had Rolls Royce, people with Rolls Royce, and really showing off their money. And here I was invited by a producer who, by the way, has invested in many other activities, and it was very clear to me that yes, all this was a bit suspect. So That's something
Right.
you can see that when you start living in the country and spending some times, and yes, year after year, when you know and you understand how all this is working, that you can, yeah, you can make the choice. But of course, it's not by staying in your office in Paris or New York or wherever you can really balance the and see the real stuff behind what the suppliers are saying.
Yeah. Now, Joe M is asking a kind of very obvious question, but a very good question. They're saying, can vetiver not be grown elsewhere? Now, I know that you said that we get some from Indonesia, we get some from India, but why are we relying so much on the one from Haiti then, if it's also...
There are a few reasons. The first reason, of course, is the cost. Because it's one of the poorest countries in the world. So you can imagine that despite the ethical sourcing projects that are in place now in Haiti, because you see you've seen on the map the region l'Écaille on the west part of Haiti. This supply chain is making a living for around 50,000 families. So you see, and this is probably one of the unique region in Haiti with a correct standard of living. So this is because of vetiver. But still, of course, the labor cost is far lower than in everywhere in the world. The poorest country are probably Madagascar and Haiti for the perfume ingredients. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason is the quality of the oil. And here I will come again on the entrepreneurship and the investment done by a couple of players in Haiti. The soil is very good because you need the volcanic soil. So that's the second point. And the third point is the quality of the distilleries. And it's amazing to see now it's a kind of factory as you could find in France or in UK. You see with a very good equipment. And I think, yes, that's the investment of a few entrepreneurs over there that now made this quality of oil the number one in the world, and even before Indonesia, because you see Indonesia is quite a developed country. You have a big entrepreneur over there, but still the quality of the vetiver oil is quite poor. And in India, I think the soil is not well adapted for the cultivation of vetiver. You see, vetiver is growing everywhere in the world. In the tropical countries, more or less, and it's very much used, you see, to maintain the soil, because with the roots, it's a very good against erosion. And for instance, you can find it when you go in Thailand, in many countries, along the railroad to really maintain the soils. And so that's the reason why Haiti became the number one producer with maybe 70% of the market share globally.
Would it be true to say that by continuing to work with Haiti, that by continuing to work with companies that you think are legitimate and okay, that actually in the long term, maybe you could sort of be helping the island and helping the people and helping them move away from criminal activities?
Yes, of course, definitely. That's but really the buyers need to go there very regularly, even if it's dangerous now, because now it's really dangerous. And I think it's important to support these people. And the most important to me is really also to develop other supply chains. And you see the second big problem in Haiti is deforestation. When you fly over Haiti, there is not a single tree left, Dariush. And you could imagine that it used to be a tropical island. So it means with a forest, as you can see in the Caribbean, everywhere. So why do you have this deforestation? Because the population is growing and the people, they cut the trees, you see, for the charcoal to cook.
Yeah.
And when you probably, I don't know if you have some pictures that I sent you, but when you see the hills and the mountains, it's amazing. You don't have any single forest left, and it would be useful to have another crop where you could, grow some trees like the lime. There was some projects on the lime, or even ylang or other trees, whatever the kind of plantation, but really to reforest the island, which is for me the most important, because you see in Port-au-Prince all the slums. When you have some heavy rains, you have thousands of people because the slums are built on the hills, and it's a tragedy every time you have some rainfalls because you don't have any tree to maintain the soil.
This is so fascinating. I think we could probably do a whole hour just on vetiver. Now, Miguel is asking a question. Thanks, Miguel. Maybe you don't even know the answer to this, but we'll ask it anyway. Miguel says, considering that Haiti is a country that shares the same island as the Dominican Republic, why couldn't the Dominican Republic start producing vetiver? It is a much more stable country compared to Haiti, says Miguel.
I did try that.
Okay.
In my past life. So
tell us some more.
So yeah, we had a partnership with a US company, by the way, to really try to develop some plantation in Dominican Republic. The problem is the soil. It's not as volcanic as Haiti first, so it's very difficult. You cannot grow vetiver on sandy soil. It's very complicated to harvest, and you have a lot of difficulties. And so yeah, it's not that easy to grow that elsewhere. And in the same time, as we said, I think it's important to keep this unique crop alive in Haiti and keep supporting the people. And I think this is the beauty also of these naturals. You see, it's a very complex supply chain. We are going to talk about myrrh, which is another big story. But you see, yes, that's tough, that's difficult, that's a long term, but this is development. And for me, this is one of the best development strategy that you can have to really develop these small crops, because it remains a small crops, even if it's that important for perfumery. But you see 100 tons of oil a year on a world global production is a very, very small crop. And for me, that's something important to help this kind of country develop.
Right. This really, really interesting details here. Now, we should do some smelling because it's going to be time to move on to myrrh soon. Now, you sent me a vetiver essence from Haiti, but you also sent me a vetiver essence from Java. I'll sort of dip a blotter into these, but do you want to tell us, you know, why is it that the Haiti one is considered to be so much better?
The grade we are using at our lab is a bit special. It's not the one that the fragrance houses have, because we have asked our producer to keep the roots longer in the soil, to clean it, and also to make the distillation at atmospheric pressure and not under pressure, because most of the time the big fragrance houses, as they want a lower cost, they have the distillation made at with some pressure, which provides not the same quality of oil. So you can see that the Java grade is more smoky, and especially in the long lastingness, because the vetiver oil, you have this kind of a bit grapefruit note on the top, and then comes the woody notes and the rooty. It's very earthy and rooty, and musky a bit as well, probably. And you will really see the difference of the quality between the Java type and the Haitian type.
To me, the Haiti one smells more complex.
Yes, exactly. You have more facets. Yes.
And also maybe it has some facets that are maybe not particularly pleasant. Immediately, like the Java one is just kind of cleaner and simpler and more. Yeah, it's sort of like you said, it's like more about the smoke and almost like leathery aspects than about earthiness and rootiness. And
yeah, because the distillation in Java, so it's the region of Bandung, you see, which is not far from Jakarta, by the way, where you have this kind of little producer of vetiver oil, but the distillation is a bit processed and done in not very good stills, and with a technique which is a bit basic. So that's why you have yes, the quality of oil is a bit poor, and you need to wait the evaporation, Darius, because really vetiver becomes interesting, and you really have the heart of the of the ingredient after a bit of evaporation. It's not an oil that you will use for the top notes, huh? Not at all.
Right, no. And I know that you said also in the information you sent me before, because you just talked about now about not uprooting the grass prematurely and distilling at atmospheric pressure. And you also mentioned the process of cleaning the roots provides a better,
Yes.
Now,
yes.
one thing I have to ask you about, because quite a few people are asking about this, and you mentioned La Réunion as well. Now, I think there are a few brands out there that say that the Vetiver from Réunion, the Vetiver Bourbon, is like the highest quality, but apparently you can't get that anymore. So is that true? Has that Vetiver pretty much gone?
No. You see, I've been living in Réunion Island. So the problem with the Réunion Island is that it's a French island. And you see, we have a lot of issues in France with this region. It's a part of a region of France because the people, the economic situation is very difficult and the costs are very high because mostly these regions really live from the assistance from France. And you see the unemployment rate is very, very high. So the cost of the oil is very expensive and you don't have any more, it's a pity, but you don't have any more agriculture in these places because agriculture is very tough and people locally, they prefer to do something else and you don't find the labor and the workers to do any kind of agriculture. In Réunion, you have a little bit of sugarcane still, but everything is imported. This is a real drama. And the Vetiver has geranium. You had the best quality of geranium in the world. Geranium Bourbon as well, like Vetiver Bourbon. And now, unfortunately, these crops and the output of oil is very, very low and anecdotic, you see. So it's I would say it's no longer in the picture of the perfume ingredients, unfortunately.
Right. No, that's interesting. Right, we're almost at the halfway mark. We should move on to the other ingredient, but I should say that if you have any more questions about Vetiver, if you post them in the comments, I should be able to put them to Remi. And also one thing I need to say, I need to start getting better and better at this. And Terry in the comments, thank you very much for prompting me, because somebody the other day said that I need to ask you as well, if you're enjoying the video, to hit the like button, because apparently that helps with the YouTube algorithm. So if we want to get the word out there more, if you're enjoying it, click on the like, because that will tell YouTube that people are enjoying the video. So as I say, there could have been more questions about Vetiver, but we should move on. And we're going to move on now to Myrrh. And that is, of course, a resin. And in terms of its appearance, actually, sometimes it can look very, very similar to frankincense, can't it? Now, I know from your materials as well that Somaliland is the country that is very, very important to the production of myrrh. But is that just because Somaliland produces a very good quality, or is it just that most of the myrrh comes from Somaliland? Do you want to tell us about that?
Alors, incense and myrrh is really one of the most fascinating supply chains, probably in the perfume industry, because you see, Darius, it dates back to far before Jesus Christ. And you see, Somaliland, you see Somali, Eritrea, Ethiopia, a bit of Oman, and it goes down to even Kenya. So this is, all these countries, north and south of Djibouti, which are desert, basically. So today, very, very poor, as you know, with a desertic climate. And it's amazing because on the 22nd century, you can imagine that these crops are still harvested, and it's from the wild. We are not in cultivation, of course, with incense and myrrh. So people are collecting the resins from the wild. The very important point is that it's done by tribes. And the notion of tribes is the most important to understand this supply chain, because basically each tribe has a surface which belongs to the tribe in the desert and where they are authorized to harvest the resin on the trees. So this is something that is not written. There is no
No,
contract.
I was just going to ask that. It's
Yes.
just an agreement, right? It's
Yes.
just an
The
understanding.
kind of historical, you see, of the ownership of the land in the desert. So, and each tribe has its own trees. So from there, when you understand that, it's really, these tribes are living from that, and from they breed also cattle. This is the two main activities. And the really the difficult and the very fragile aspect of the supply chain is the fact that the nomad, most of the time, the nomad population who are living from this crop are moving with the water, I would say, because with the drought, you see, sometimes they are moving to other places, and there is a very fragile balance. You see, for a few years' time, that there was a problem because there is too much demand because of the aromatherapy business, and it put a lot of pressure on these supply chains because the people were harvesting too much the trees, because basically when you make this incision on the trunk, then you wait for a couple of weeks and then you collect the gum, you see. And then you can do that a few times, but then you need to leave the tree without working it, so it can get some strength back. And unfortunately, when there is a lot of demand, sometimes you want farmers to have a demand, but in this case, there was too much pressure on the market, and the people were harvesting too often. And therefore, you see, it was very detrimental to the trees. So the resources needs to be really closely monitored, and it's very important to work with some local people who manage this situation between the tribes, and to work with the right tribes, and also to explain to them that they need to maintain the resource, because the trees, of course, you have trees everywhere in the desert, but the places which are accessible, because sometimes it's too far, need to be harvested the right way in order to avoid to destroy it, and then see to lose. So in sense, you see, is a very big market if you compare, of course, to Myrrh. Myrrh is a niche market. In sense, as you know, is used for a lot of things, might be to the church, and there is a very big market, and the specific qualities of gums that goes into the church. So perfumery is quite a small business, but in sense is really a huge market with a lot of different grades and origins. So it's very complex. And Myrrh is a very smaller market, but with the same principles and sometimes the same tribes that are working on the two supply chains, you see.
And so how do you, because you said that you work directly and specifically with some tribes, or
No.
do you deal with the companies?
No. It's, you can, unfortunately, you cannot work directly with
Okay,
the
so who's like this? Who acts as the sort of middle people then?
Yes, so it's a very, very complex supply chain. We work with one of the best experts that goes very often in this country, and he has this kind of, I would say, network with local people who are collecting from identified tribes and therefore places. And then from there, you can select the right gums, know where it comes from, so you have a kind of traceability, which is always difficult, but you can recognize when you analyze the gums more or less where it's coming from. But the most difficult is really this is the traceability, and to try to be able to work always with the same population, even if it's indirectly, but the local contact is to have this kind of long-term relationship to make sure that we get always the same gums, and you see the same quality of gums. So yes, the main trouble and the main expertise, I would say, is really the selection of the gums, and to have the right partner locally to have this this partnership with the local tribes.
And the interesting thing that you said as well is that a lot of the work of actually getting the gum apparently is carried out, or maybe all of the work is carried out by women. Is
Yeah.
there a sort of particular social or cultural reason why that's happened?
Yes, well, you see, unfortunately, in Africa, which is a very big continent, the activity is held by the women.
Right.
And the power of Africa is women, it's not men. I can tell you, the men, they spend the money, they drink, they they have. If you need to invest in Africa, you need to invest in women, not in men, Darius. Always. And I think, yes, these kind of countries, yes, the cultural activity, the women are really the workforce of Africa, making the revenues and being very dedicated. And by the way, the partner we have over there and the contact we have is a woman who has been working for different NGOs. And so, yes, that's something in the culture. And then all these gums are traded most of the time to Dubai, and then you can find these gums you see in this kind of marketplace where you have really the buyers that might come from India or from other countries. So yes, it's a very, very complex supply chain. Probably the most complex that we have in the perfume business, you see, in terms of ingredient, the most complex and the most dangerous, because as you know, when you talk about Somaliland, Somaliland is not a country. Huh? It's nothing. It's just it's a kind of district and more or less of region. So it's quite dangerous to go there because again, it's not controlled and it's so vast. It's such a huge territory that you almost have no control over these huge countries and places in the desert. So yes, it's quite tricky.
And I know that we need to be careful about generalizations and making sort of sweeping statements, but certainly I also know that in the past a lot of charity organizations, a lot of NGOs would say that if you really, really want to bring about some kind of lasting change in a community, you need to target the women, because it's the women who seem to be able to, and I am generalizing, but the women who seem to be able to put in the work for the long-term plans and think ahead and think about, not just spending everything in one go. Terrible generalization, but I guess in this case it seems to be true. Now, one thing that you said as well was that recently the price of myrrh went up by a huge factor. I think you said it went up about 4 times. Now, is that to do with the over harvesting?
Yes, because of the market demand.
Right.
From aromatherapy, not only, but mainly from aromatherapy. And of course, it put a lot of pressure at the origin and for the supply. So yes, that's why this work of education with the local people is important, to make sure that they will keep this source of revenues in the future and not destroy the trees because of the over exploitation.
It's fascinating. Now, you sent me 2 little bottles of myrrh. So there's a resinoid. What does that mean? Lavé? Does that mean washed or?
Yeah, because you need to remove some parts. So it's a kind of, let's say, absolute, if you prefer.
Okay.
And then you have the essential oil. So
and the
you
essential
need to know
oil.
that you have the winter and the summer crop for myrrh, so with quite a different smell. So now we are working on this parameter, and it's quite interesting. And we will.
So hang on. Sorry to interrupt. Did you say that depending on the time of year you harvest it, you get a different smell?
Yes.
Oh, go on. Tell us a bit more about that then.
Yeah. So yes, we are now exploring other grades of myrrh to really bring this diversity on our palette of ingredients to our perfumer. But yeah, to try to identify kind of niche products and specific sources of gums, because there is really, we discovered that there is really a very different olfactive profile. So the myrrh you have now is quite, I would say, the classical grade, which has this smell a bit of licorice and also of, very
So
resin.
is this summer or winter? Do you know?
No, this one. This one is I would say it's a blend because the first grade that you need to have is really an average. But now we are working on some different parameters to have a bit more specific products.
And we have been talking just about Somaliland, but doesn't it grow anywhere else? Can't we use myrrh from anywhere else?
Alors, it does not. Yeah, it does not grow. The trees are growing basically, but as I told you, it's the places where you find it. It's a very vast. If you look on the map, Darius, that you have in my presentation,
Yes.
From the. Sorry, let me check. Yeah, I put the map as well on my computer. But you see, if you take Djibouti, you see. You have on the map that I sent you, you see Berbera. So Berbera is the export port. Basically, you have Djibouti in the north. So it goes even to the north of Djibouti. And then you can have in Ethiopia, you see it goes to the east, to the Puntland, on the center, the Sanag region. So it's a huge distance and countries, even down to Kenya, you see sometimes. So
but doesn't it grow wild anywhere else?
I don't know. Frankly speaking, it's already thousands of kilometers that you can explore, and I would say try to identify the different qualities and grades, and but probably you need a desertic climate for sure. But I do not know, for instance, if in Asia you have this kind of species, and it's really the historical background is Africa and Arabic, you see, countries. It was very much used in Egypt, as you know.
So then the other question, question here from Rachel. Thanks very much for this. She says, can their trees be farmed?
No, it can probably. Everything can be farmed or cultivated, but then it has not been, I would say, tried, and I'm not sure that if you can, if there was some experiment to try to cultivate these trees, but I don't know exactly. What I know is that there is this really supply chain organized around the collection from tribes, but then to have the cultivation, it would be complicated because you have different crops during the years, and that's why the tribe, they have trees in different places to be able to collect at different parts in the years. It would change, I would say, the total. If you cultivate it, you would need some employees, and it would kill this source of revenues for the local population, and basically they make a living from that. And as I told you, from the cattle, you see the trade of cattle, camels, and sheep. So yes, it would also be probably a pity to make the cultivation, but that's probably an interesting experiment. But I've not heard of this kind of experiment to cultivate this tree.
Now, one question that's been coming up, and I've just sort of been saving for the end, and we can talk about this question in relation to myrrh and also vetiver, but people were asking it, first of all, to do with vetiver, is whether there are any useful or convincing synthetic alternatives. I mean, as obviously you know, there are some synthetic versions of oud which are available out there, which are not bad. There's some of them kind of smell okay. We use a lot of synthetic sandalwoods in perfumery now. Some of them smell better than others. Are there such things as synthetic myrrhs, synthetic vetivers?
That's always the same question, Darius. You have woody notes, synthetic woody notes, which are very good as an ingredient, but I would say you will never ever replace the complexity of naturals. Might it be sandalwood, rose, vetiver, or whatever. So it depends the kind of perfumery you want to do. If you want to make a very powerful perfumery with only the objective of being long lasting, and you can use this kind of synthetic molecules which are desperately lacking facets. Then if you want to have a more sophisticated and more faceted perfumery, you need to use this kind of natural ingredient. So I would say that's not the right question really to ask if we can replace or not. No, we will never replace, because you see in this kind of oil, might it be rose, sandalwood, or vetiver, you have hundreds of molecules inside. So it would be very complex and much more costly than the vetiver, but never a simple synthetic molecule will replace such a complexity as a natural ingredient.
Okay.
I don't know. It just, if you ask me, if you can replace a dish, you see what I mean, a complex dish, by a synthetic, something, a replacer. It's impossible to.
No, I understand it. It's but you also sent me a sample of the Vetiver acetate, right?
Alors yes, alors
Now,
this is synthetic, but this is
derived from the natural.
This is made from the oil.
And is that correct that it's more expensive?
Oh yeah, because you reprocess the oil basically, so you have a yield, you have an additional cost to process with the saponification. So it's a quite a bit complex chemical process, but yeah, that's a bit a different product where you have, it's more musky. You see, but it's another interesting one, but derived from the natural vetiver oil. It's not a simple molecule. It's really derived from a natural.
Oh, well, so at least one brand has just taken Vetiver acetate, I think, and just diluted it and turned it into a perfume. I believe. Yeah,
That's a good business.
And what are the sort of qualities that myrrh brings to a perfume? You know, like why would you want to put myrrh into a perfume formula? What are the particular characteristics it has?
But yeah, it should be asked to a perfumer, but I would say that in the Oriental velour from Les Indemodables, it was interesting to balance this the resin with the rooty and the earthy note that you have in the vetiver. And for me, there is, you see, when you use in a bit overdosage this kind of ingredients like incense, like myrrh, like vetiver, there is a kind of spiritual benefit. When you, I don't know if you try the Oriental velour on the skin, but for me,
oh, absolutely, yeah.
It makes me more relaxed, or there is something more than just having a perfume on the skin. And then it's a question of accord. It's something very warm. It's something very cozy. I think so. Yeah, it depends on the creative direction that you want to take, but then it's
okay. Wonderful.
The choice of,
Remi, as always, we could listen to you for ages and ages and ages, and I can sort of tell from the number of questions coming, but also from the times when the chat goes silent, that people are really listening to your every word. Is there anything that you wish I had asked you about Vetiver or myrrh? Is there any kind of really important issue that you wish you had got across that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
I think no. The only point is really to as we say, you see, Darius, from the beginning, we are not trying to make an opposition between the natural and the synthetics. For me, you need both in a palette of ingredients, because you have very good synthetics which are produced from sustainable sources. So myself, I really prefer aesthetic, and that's why I don't want to go into 100% natural perfumery, because otherwise it's just like if you remove some colors from the palette of the painter. And yes, it's important to safeguard this ingredient and the people behind who are making a living from that. And for me, this is why I'm here also, not only to talk about the ingredient themselves, but really the families and the people who are living in these very poor countries. And I think it's important that perfumery keeps and support these unique products and the tradition of the people behind and their way of living, which is not standardized, which is not westernized. And yes, this is my passion and what I try to do with this with our contribution, you see.
And thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you so much. Hopefully it won't be long before we're able to talk about 2 more ingredients. Thank you very much to everybody for watching. Stay tuned to social media for details of more videos coming your way. But until then, take care, everybody. See you soon. Bye now.